If you're ever trying to think of one of the most widely known game developers and publishers of all time, you might end up at Rockstar Games, and for good reason. Any look at a best-selling franchise list, and Grand Theft Auto is sitting around the top. GTA 5 has remained a top seller for ages now, mostly because they keep re-releasing the thing. GTA 6 win? Apparently it's this year, but I don't know. Somehow they've released less games than Valve over the last decade, which is impressive. But before all that, prior to the 10 plus studios they have worldwide, prior to Take-Two Interactive creating the Rockstar Games label, we had humble beginnings with a little studio over in Scotland called DMA Design. There were Lemmings, legendary Amiga releases, a couple of bizarre Nintendo 64 exclusives, and of course, a bunch of long forgotten games with barely to no re-releases or ports. Things that need sequels, like Austin Powers for the Game Boy Color. Groovy? Okay, maybe not, but it did have totally awesome Bit Crushed video clips.
Where am I?
So hang up your Red Dead Redemptions and Max Paynes, even though I love Max Payne 3, it's time to talk about a bunch of games that Rockstar doesn't seem to care much about. Look, I'm just saying the GTA 6 needs to have a playable version of table tennis. Yeah. So yo, it's Austin, and today we're gonna be diving into a bunch of forgotten and weird Rockstar games. Also DMA Design. There's a whole legacy of things here that goes back like a full decade before Grand Theft Auto, with a couple things that might surprise you. But before we get started, we need to go back to the 1950s with today's sponsor, Deliver at All Costs. Deliver at All Costs is a brand new Swedish indie action game made by Far Out Games and Konami set in the 1950s, where you're tasked with one thing: making a delivery at any cost. You play as Winston Green, an out-of-luck courier who gets a job at We Deliver to be in charge of highly unconventional cargo, and the only way to get that done is with a ridiculous trail of destruction and chaos. Like this. The dynamic world map is filled with things to do, winding streets to navigate, and all sorts of NPCs to talk to. Some of which won't hesitate to take it out on you if you're, say, delivering exploding fireworks, delivering massive marlins, or just trying to get rid of a bomb. But the job's gotta get done. There's a bunch of characters to meet, all of which slowly help Winston descend into the depths of insanity. Deliver at All Costs is pretty neat. It's got this feeling of classics from the day while making the environment highly destructible so nothing stands in your way. So if this kind of game interests you, and I had a good time myself, check out Deliver at All Costs. The game's available now on Steam, PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X, Epic Games Store, and GOG. There's even a demo you can try. Check it out in the description. Thanks to Konami and Far Out Games for the sponsor, but for now, I need to bring y'all back to an era that probably does need an introduction. Prior to making some of the biggest, most expensive games on the planet that sell like a bajillion copies each, Rockstar Games was a little studio called DMA Design, making little hits like Menace for the Commodore Amiga. And I use the word hit lightly. The year is 1988, Rockstar North, or as they were known, DMA Design had just opened their doors and immediately snagged a multi-game deal with publisher Psygnosis, rest in peace. You might have heard both of these names before if you're a fellow Eldritch gamer, but for the giant Rockstar, it was just the start. All of this was spearheaded by game developer David Jones, who was ready to release before anyone could blink into the deal, a game called Menace, something that needs you to know who made it on the bottom right hand of the screen. Menace dropped for the Amiga in October of '88, and actually has Cyclops on the cover, the name Psygnosis used before deciding on the Gnosis. Truthfully, there's not too much going on with this one. You're playing as an alien space fighter traveling through several regions of the planet Draconia to do the shmup thing. It's very much inspired by Gradius. You got upgrades, you got options, but only Menace has occasional voice clips from a developer who tried their best. Hey, at least that's better than the cavalcade of ear-destroying sound effects mixed together with one of the two songs. A good first try, one that sold 20,000 copies, but clearly still their first effort. What's the next thing you'd expect from DMA Star? Well, besides a couple ports, I hope the answer's another shmup, Blood Money.
First, there was Menace. Now, Psygnosis presents
There's a whole lot more coming.
The biggest unanswered question is where is the
There's a
money?
whole lot more coming.
Despite this 11 out of 10 production for the intro, 1989's Blood Money is basically more of the same, except this time you can face the other way. The graphics are a bit better, but mechanically it's still a hard recommendation, especially considering if you touch a wall for more than a second, you'll just explode, which sucks when you got enemies to take out on the ground. It's rough. Both Blood Money and Menace may not be thought of as much these days, but they were absolutely a solid start for DMA Design. In an era when most home computer side-scrolling games couldn't scroll vertically or were plagued with a ridiculous amount of slowdown, DMA's releases showed off the power of the Amiga more than several other devs of the time. Case in point, Walker. Another shmup, but in this one you play as an ATST with back problems. Walker looked really good, even kinda does nowadays. The mech, Walker, has so many frames of animation, and it's great to look at, especially when you're blasting away a ridiculous amount of tiny soldiers that'll explode into piles. Okay, that's actually pretty violent. Probably a good glimpse into the future. The good news though is Walker is pretty fun for like 10 minutes. Then you realize that what you've been seeing is the entirety of the experience. Walking around like a Terminator, blasting small dudes in the same apocalyptic backdrops with different color palettes for about an hour. I love that some of this takes place in the far distant future of 2019. Next up, hired guns. It's 1993, DMA Design had a ridiculous idea and they went hard. Amiga, split screen, 4-player, competitive, cooperative, maze dungeon crawling game. That is a lot of words for something from the 90s, but truly, Hired Gun tried its hardest to do everything I just said, and it's absolutely too much for a single person. Literally, trying to control Hired Gun solo is one of the hardest games I've ever played. And it's also from this era of games, so you know what's gonna happen. Accidental friendly fire on myself, killing teammates, trying to navigate the clumsy inventory systems, and just trying to figure out how to fire a gun. It's almost like this is meant for multiple players. And according to reviews from the time and various Amiga fan sites, it was actually kind of a blast. Flawed, but still. And hey, I kinda get it, it's a vibe. Plug a few gamepads into the PC, gather around a tiny monitor, and have a blast until like 2 in the morning. Just make sure to keep these spare floppies nearby and get ready for 5+ minutes of loading. Sonic 06 got nothing on this. There's one last game from the early 90s we skipped over, and it's probably the most well-known. Ever heard of Lemmings? Of course you have. Unless you're born after the year 2005, considering modern gamers hate puzzle games. Go play Blueprints, by the way. Lemmings is a classic in the puzzle genre. Full stop, that's all. I played this on the Sega Genesis back in the day without really understanding what was going on, but little did I know I was actually preparing myself for basic problem solving. The goal is simple, you just need to guide the lemmings towards safety, and you do it by giving them jobs in order to redirect or create paths for the other ones. And for others, it's thanks comrade, now explode. Simple, yes. Fun, very. DMA were the originators of the franchise back in '91, and it was such a big hit upon release that they continued to put out expansions and holiday-themed packs. Oh no, more Lemmings, Holiday Lemmings 93, 94, Lemmings Escape Alcatraz. We got the sequels with 2 The Tribes, and finally, All New World of Lemmings. After the third one, DMA would move on to bigger and better titles involving carjacking crimes, while Psygnosis would make sequels and spin-offs after being purchased by Sony. So you're probably saying, how's a game that's been ported a bajillion times and sold around 20 million copies forgotten? And to that I say the popularity of these dudes has just fallen off. They truly don't make these types of games anymore, and any of the ports or mobile free-to-play releases barely make a splash at all. I think many gamers have a fondness for these dudes, but Sony seems to have forgotten about them, considering the last actual release they saw was back in 2014 on the PlayStation Vita. What? The original Lemmings are nowhere to be seen on Steam, consoles, or even GOG. Just a wish page filled with a couple of 30 to 40 somethings. Despite releasing on the PlayStation 1, Sony didn't even put these iconic video game characters in Astro Bot. And best we got's a freemium mobile game, which just isn't the same. So to all of this I say, come on Sony, give the newer generations the chance to accidentally blow up some lemmings. That'd be that for DMA on the Amiga. However, before becoming Rockstar proper, there'd still be a couple years of interesting and maybe forgotten games. Grand Theft Auto was a decent hit on the PS1 and PC, but they would also team up with Nintendo for a couple of exclusives that don't quite scream Rockstar. For instance, Uniracers, or if you're outside the States, Unirally. You might not know about some of their canceled titles like Kid Kirby, like actual Nintendo Kirby. This was gonna support the Super Nintendo mouse and everything, but it didn't sell enough, so they axed the whole thing. So on the flip side of the next generation, Nintendo was gonna publish something else with DMA that also got hit with their stick, Body Harvest. This was gonna be a launch title for the Nintendo 64, but it ran into a whole slew of publishing issues. Wanting to work directly with the developers, Nintendo and DMA ran into all sorts of language barrier issues. They weren't satisfied with the visual style, the violence levels were too high. Communicating this was tough for them. them. So Nintendo dropped them yet again, and years later it'd finally see the light of day being published by Midway and Gremlin Interactive in the EU. So finally, in 1998, Body Harvest. Body Harvest is ambitious to say the least. You can see a lot of what Rockstar's future looked like. It had this massive open-ish world with a bunch of different locations. Even if they all look the same, you'll play through stages as Adam Drake, traveling through time, walking or driving from point A to B, blasting a ton of aliens and stopping them from doing the namesake of the game. Shuffle that blocky body through different buildings and terrain and watch every single detail pop up on the screen through the thickest Nintendo 64 fog you've ever seen. Well, at least until Space Station Silicon Valley, also developed by DMA. I covered that in this video here. It's a bizarre, fantastic little game. Ever wanted to play Necromancer with a bunch of animals and microchips and listen to the kitchen sink of British humor? This little game's a gem. Anyways, yeah, Body Harvest is a little repetitive, but cool. I mean, just having this big open world that you can explore in random directions and do whatever in is a great selling point. There won't be much besides flat textures and random aliens, but for 1998, the ambition was there. Drivable tanks and planes just sit around in the wild, and it's hard to go wrong with that. It's not the greatest open world romp, but absolutely the stepping stone evolution towards what you would eventually see with Grand Theft Auto 3. So here's where things start to get a bit messy with DMA. During the development of Body Harvest, they'd be bought by Gremlin, who would then sell them over to Take-Two Interactive before it came out. Both Body Harvest and Space Station Silicon Valley would release in the same month, neither sold very well, and both would fall into obscurity, which sucks. There's only a handful more games with the DMA Design developer name attached. Grand Theft Auto 2 and 3, of course, but also a few things that went under the radar. Ever heard of Tanktix or Wild Metal Country? Yeah, thought so. Probably for good reason, considering both of the review scores are lackluster to awful. Wild Metal Country, also just Wild Metal on the Dreamcast, is a tank fighting and shooting game where your mission is simple: destroy everything. Yeah, riveting, I know. Wild Metal Country, where the big game is. It's like WCW's slogan, except instead it's just one of the most middle-of-the-road, slow-paced tank games you've ever played.
This is where the big boys play, huh?
The aiming system's clearly not meant for the Dreamcast, as the controls are all mapped onto the most random buttons. X and Y to look up and down? Huh? You can see a little bit of that Body Harvest DNA here, but earnestly, it doesn't have much going on beyond driving and shooting with your wide array of weapons. That's your little frame on the bottom. You can barely tell what it is. Meanwhile, we also got Tanktix, published by good old Interplay Entertainment with a good old 3.5 from IGN, Tanktix. Although, I think this one might be low for a reason. I was unable to get this running properly on my PC, but it looks like a whole bunch of rapid screen scrolling while deploying tanks. Just instead of massive metal machines, you've got all the spice taken off and transformed into cartoony nonsense. I don't have much of an opinion on this, but it seems like not many do. I guess Rockstar doesn't do well with tank games, huh? Funny enough, these two releases would be DMA Design's last games before the advent of Rockstar Games, the publisher. Take-Two had their studios, they acquired a bunch of IPs and stuff from BMG Interactive, and it was time to start a legacy. DMA Design would rebrand to Rockstar North with Vice City, but now Rockstar Games, the publisher, would be churning out stuff left and right, like 5 to 10 releases a year, publishing stuff by all sorts of studios. The PlayStation 2 version of Oni by Bungie. You don't know Jack on the PlayStation 1, Thrasher Skate and Destroy. But you know what their first published game was? Well, besides GTA London missions? Monster Trucks. A whole bunch of WCW branded ones too. 2 times in a single video. It's on the brain, I guess. Monster Truck Madness 64, a port of the sequel to the first of Microsoft's Madness franchise. This one, it just ain't it. It all comes down to the controls. I mean, it's understandable that these trucks are just freaking unwieldy and hard to move, but I don't know if a slight nudge to the control stick should be doing this. This one's quite possibly one of the most insane racing games I've played in a hot minute. Monster Truck Madness was originally developed by Edge of Reality, who would go on to make Sega's Incredible Hulk and Transformers Rise of Darkspark. We're gonna be talking about a lot of different devs moving forward, by the way. Visually, it looks decent. You can swap on weather effects for each track. You can play at different times of the day. There's even some wackier game modes to experience, like King of the Hill mode, though weirdly, it's missing the Madness game classic, Free Roam. Memories of sitting in a Gateway store playing Midtown Madness until my parents forced me to leave. Basically what I'm saying is there ain't nowhere to launch you 100 feet skyward like a cannon, and well, that's a big shame. So we're officially in a Rockstar Games territory. They're going full steam ahead acquiring studios and slapping their names on all sorts of projects. The PlayStation 2 was on the horizon and Rockstar wanted to get a presence on the launch lineup, which of course means going after an unknown Japanese surfing game. Have you ever heard of Surfoid, the legendary surfer? Yeah, probably not. Developed by Opus, the same people who brought you, and I'm not kidding, Half Minute Hero, Surfoid is definitely a budget sports release for console launch starved gamers. It just doesn't play or control particularly well. I mean, maybe it would if you had the little wakeboard skateboard attachment from the Japanese release, kinda like Yanya Cabalista with its mini skateboard. Tech deck culture was in, but we may never know. The story's kinda wacky. There's this asteroid that crashes into the moon, the debris from it falls into the Earth, thus turning the planet into the perfect place for riding the sickest waves known to mankind. They are so good, in fact, that aliens start making their way to the planet to participate in the cyberspace surfing tournament, aka intergalactic gnar shredding. We got alien birds, shark people, and a whole man made out of rocks.
I wished to become rocks and then it happened. Oops.
The ladies racer is literally just sexy, that's it. Good old 2000. Honestly, it's a great premise with a lot of character and interesting surfers to control. Even Electronic Gaming Monthly thought so back in the day when they teased a preview of Rockstar's Western releases stating, quote, "The wacky story is just something you'll have to see to believe." Or, and I do mean or, Rockstar could strip out everything relating to the asteroids, aliens, and turn all the wacky characters into normal, boring ass people. Yes, who I've always wanted to play as, Mark Mavericks.
Copy that, Goose.
All right, Goose, bullshit, you're Goose. Hell no, I'm Maverick.
I don't think so.
Now simply Surfing H3O, which is kind of a good name. Every single reason to check out this release was washed out to sea by the waves. And it seems like most of the reviews from the time agreed. Without the board controller clip accessory, the control scheme is so confusing, it's one of the most mind-boggling known to extreme sports games. I played this thing for like an hour and a half and could barely pull off a single trick. I even watched the entire tutorial video through twice and nothing would stick. With all the sauce taken out, there's no real reason to ever check this out past the Japanese original's intro, so yeah, bad game, don't play it. Around the same time, Rockstar began to really try and sell GTA. They were pushing it onto all sorts of platforms. As long as it had a screen and could play games, they were willing to try, which is probably why we ended up with the Game Boy Color port. Time tends to forget that Nintendo took on GTA all the way back in 1999. Just, you know, axe the gore and swearing. Gotta make sure the kiddos can play it. GTA on GBC, ported by Tarantula Studios, who'd become Rockstar Lincoln, is perfectly acceptable. Tarantula had a number of decent portable ports around this time, including Space Station Silicon Valley, and so Grand Theft Auto was right up their alley. Maybe has a bit too much wandering around for my taste, but it got the job done. What's more interesting is what comes next. The much more powerful Game Boy Advance dropped in 2001, and a few years later, Digital Eclipse would put out Grand Theft Auto Advance, one of only 9 titles on the handheld to be rated M for mature, which means yes, the gore and swearing has been unaxed. That's a lot more than I thought. What's cool about this is that it's actually a prequel to GTA 3, and it's not a port of 1. You're playing as a dude named Mike, but you'll run into notable NPCs and villains from the Big Boy console sequel. Liberty City translated really well to this version. The world and gameplay feels way closer to the 3D titles than the 2D predecessors, and it's surprisingly impressive for such a small handheld. Digital Eclipse pulled off something cool here, which has made it worth a play, especially if you're a fan of the last 2D GTA, Chinatown Wars. But let's take take a break from the relatively obscure Grand Theft Auto franchise and backspin our way into the future to the Xbox 360 for one of Rockstar's more notable titles. Rockstar Games presents Table Tennis. The title says it all. Something that might actually be the single best table tennis video game of all time. Not that there's much competition in the space. What else we got? Wii Sports Resort, Connect Sports, Balls of Fury.
Tastes good.
Yeah, I think this one wins out. Platinum Family Hits Rockstar Games presents Table Tennis, a game with the Rockstar logo and name on it 3 times, was made by Rockstar San Diego, the former Angel Studios. Earnestly, it feels like this was developed to be more of a technical showcase of their Rage engine fresh out of the oven for the 7th generation of game consoles. It even made its way to the Wii a year later. I played a decent amount of this at my friend's place around the time the 360 released, and it was definitely the game in the console when we found out the circle scratch of death was a thing. There may not be much to talk about with it, but I always felt that table tennis was super underrated and one of those things that should have made its way into GTA 5 or online. Hopefully they'll slap the whole thing into 6 because Virtua Tennis is gone, and this is the next best thing. Mid-2000s Rockstar was all over the place. State of Emergency is one of those I have covered before, where it's the classic Jack Thompson formula. Ridiculous, senseless violence, large numbers flashing all over the screen, and combo meters very representative of the era. That sequel sucked though. You never get the serious emotional drama you'd get with like Red Dead Redemption 1 and 2 during the PlayStation 2 days, but you would get a third-person shooter with fast-paced action and the most basic voice acting this side of Chaos Wars.
Mister, you could really use a hot bath and some fresh clothes.
Yeah, that's the stuff. Red Dead Revolver. Originally gonna be a Capcom title made by Angel Studios in the early 2000s, believe it or not. This all got packaged up after Rockstar acquired everything, sat on the shelf for a few years, and then they threw it out there in 2004. You wouldn't think that this would be the origin point of the franchise starring John Marston and Arthur Morgan, considering it, well, was this.
Next time.
Revolver's been totally overshadowed by its successors, rightfully so, but it's also a bit unfortunate. Revolver's a great arena dude shooter that never strays far from its target of being exactly that. Unlike its open world Rockstar formula-ified sequels, you just go from stage to stage, rootin', tootin', and shootin'. It's way more lighthearted, and by that I mean you'll occasionally fight bosses who fart at you.
Whoa! Easy on them baked beans, Sheriff.
Occasionally you're thrown into a small town or roaming section where you get the chance to talk to people for a bit, but it's not much more than breathing room for all the head popping you'll be doing. Most chapters have you in control of Red Harlow, a simple bounty hunter who had the classic watched my parents die origin story. It's a pretty typical cowboy romp setup, but sometimes the POV will swap to another character like Jack Swift, Annie Strokes, or the Buffalo Soldier, each with their own unique weapon set. There's no hunting, free roam horseback riding, gambling, or tying people up and putting them on the railroad tracks all dastard-like, but sometimes, especially in the mid-2000s, a fast-paced third-person shooter just hit the spot. It's not perfect, it can be real janky, and the controls feel foreign compared to how we do third-person these days, but that also means you can pull off awesome 360 spinning front flips and get destroyed by beams on top of a train. It ain't perfect, but Red Dead Revolver is such an interesting start to a huge franchise that, at the very least, is a fun time. A short fun time, too. You can finish it in like 6 to 8 hours, no problem. I'd recommend trying it out if you haven't. It's even on PlayStation Network. Just look for the yelling guy, and try not to yell yourself.
See you in hell.
If anyone's gonna be yelling, it's because they played some of Rockstar's early licensed games. It cannot be understated just how much of an identity crisis Rockstar, the publisher, was having in the 2000s. Kind of like how they put out a Pokemon Red and Blue-ass collection of Austin Powers video games on the Game Boy Color. Oh, behave, and welcome to my underground lair. I really don't want to talk about these things again, so let's make it quick. The Austin Powers collection on the Game Boy Color are not games. They're a low-budget recreation of a computer operating system with basic minigames thrown in that are certainly not worth any amount of dollars to own. We got rock, paper, scissors, Reversey, and even a Pac-Man clone. The only catch is that various Austin Powers characters will appear, and that's all you get. Unless you include the physics-based motorcycle platformer, which barely predates the classic Trials franchise debut Flash game. It's about as good as you'd expect. I don't know why Rockstar had their heart set on releasing 2 Austin Powers video games, especially when they canceled 2 more. Yeah, baby, yeah, and why make millions? That's right, there's a universe where we had 4 Austin Powers video games all hit store shelves late 2000 on the same day, forever changing the course of Rockstar Games. These got leaked from Nintendo during 2020, and it's just more of the same. Plus a top-down racer, a little jetpack minigame where you play as Dr. Evil, and it's the single most buggy one of the bunch. I don't think anyone would complain if these were lost forever. But remember that motorcycle minigame I just mentioned? Turns out it wasn't completely original, as it was actually based off of Tarantula Studios' previous release, also published by Rockstar, Evel Knievel. Yeah, like based off the real stunt performer who got famous for doing big jumps on motorcycles, which means, as you'd probably expect in this micro release, you do big jumps on motorcycles. Well, as big as the Game Boy Color allowed. It's got a lot more levels than the Austin Powers mini game, but again, it's incredibly difficult to pull off as a single wipeout tosses you back to the beginning of a stage, which is gonna happen over and over. It's really hard, at least when you're able to finally conquer some of the more difficult bits. Finishing a stage fills you with pride. Truly, the Proto Trials. Anyone remember The Italian Job? No, not the remake, which has its own video game on the GameCube and PS2. I mean the 1969 original, The Italian Job for the PlayStation 1. Typically, it's strange when a licensed game gets made several decades after the original prominence, but hey, if the film Anaconda can get a remake, literally anything can happen.
Kool-Aid.
I guess they were smelling tie-in money, just like that one Lord of the Rings Fellowship game, and just went for it. Italian Job is basically Driver, but a whole lot more British, and with the middle-of-the-road reviews you'd probably expect. Every mission has an introduction narrated by one of the characters with a thick accent and some British humor.
Typical, innit? I've been out of jail 5 minutes and I'm in a hot car.
No, that's not Michael Caine, by the way. It's Phil Cornwell doing an impersonation, just after a full minute of loading screens. When I say Driver, I mean Driver, like through and through. Seriously, this feels like a spin-off of that game with its free driving mode and even the physics. Not as tight, obviously, and without the soul-crushingly difficult tutorial stage. Italian Job actually isn't too bad. It's got some fun moments as long as you can escape the police, which is kind of the entire point.
That's it, you're under arrest.
Speaking of getting arrested, but instead doing it in the coolest way possible according to the 90s, skateboarding. Thrasher Skate and Destroy is not a Tony Hawk clone, believe it or not. It came out 2 short months after the Birdman had his time in the sun, but unlike that game's fast-paced, unrealistic arcadey focus, Thrasher ends up being in the skateboarding sim camp. It's way more technical, it doesn't have you trying to pull off massive combos, and instead just wants you to land impressive tricks for big points. Just make sure not to run out of life. Yeah, there's a health bar, and you can die. That bar will drain if you start ragdolling too. This was actually one of the first games with ragdolling tech on the PlayStation 1. Those wizards over at Z-Axis knew their stuff. While Thrasher excels in style and controls, the level designs do leave a lot to be desired. One of the big contributing factors to Tony's success were its level designs. They were big, sometimes wild, detailed, and just a lot of fun to move around in for 2 minutes at a time. Thrasher goes for a more realistic approach with the dull skate parks and pop-ins. At a visual glance, you wouldn't be able to tell much of a difference between the 12 levels. Lots of empty space though. When you can get a little run, it's a lot of fun, but nowhere near as memorable as its competitors. Just make sure to exit the level when you hit the point requirement, or else the law will begin to hunt you down.
Get over here and make it easy on yourself. You punks think you're so smart.
Or just like outskate them. Thrasher is definitely the more technically advanced and interesting game, but in a world of 90s ska, the Hawk reigns supreme. We can only dream of the universe with Thrasher 3 and 4 remake on the horizon. Rockstar's got a few other licensed games in their history of acquired developers going back to the 80s, but they've only got one big release from the last 20 years. And following The Italian Job, it's based off a movie way older. The first fully original title by Rockstar Toronto, after being acquired, was a little game that's been heralded as one of the best tie-in movie releases of all time, The Warriors.
Warriors, come out to play.
I've always felt that in the grand scheme of things, Rockstar's The Warriors gets overshadowed in favor of their other stuff. It's not like The Warriors doesn't have a full 11-hour long campaign with optional side content including a brawling mode or anything, because it does, which is really advanced for a movie tie-in. It might have something to do with the fact that The Warriors isn't a very strong IP. It was a cult classic upon release, got hammered by critics for, quote, being unrealistic and lacking depth until it picked up steam decades later. What's hard to believe about street gangs doing over-the-top street gang things? What they want, realism out of The Warriors? I remember seeing Warriors the video game all over magazines and E3 coverage. It even got really good reviews at the time, sold a couple million copies and all, but I feel like both Rockstar and gamers have left this one in the past. The first half of the narrative is a completely new story preceding the events of the film by 3 months. You get optional flashback missions that'll go into details about how some of the members join up, and then eventually, the second half of the game directly follows the film. I don't think I've seen many licensed video games take this route of like being a full supplemental piece, but hey, props to Rockstar for respecting the movie. It's strong and helps the kickoff event of the movie's plot have that much more weight. It's pretty good. Gameplay-wise, most of the time you're running around rumbling with other gangs and tagging their spots. Simple, sure, but the combat is what sets it apart. It's way more in depth than a lot of Rockstar's other big releases and fellow beat-em-ups from the era. You've got grapples, leg sweeps, a big variety of weapons to pick up, and a decent list of combos, some of which can only be activated in Rage mode. Yeah, we got Rage mode. I love me some camp. We got God Hand up in here. We've also got stealth gameplay, which is fine. It's not Splinter Cell, that's for sure, but hey, everything was feature creeping stealth gameplay in the 2000s, so I can take it or leave it. The actual fun comes from smashing and brawling, grabbing loot, beating up dudes, and of course, fleeing from the popo. Not to mention the story and acting being pretty good, considering they brought back a handful of the original actors who were still alive, including Michael Beck, Dorsey Wright, and James Remar, even if they don't sound like they're 20 anymore. The Warriors is, in my opinion, a Rockstar Games classic, one you can actually pick up on the PlayStation Network if you want to give it a spin, and you should. It's even got pretty good co-op, which is the best. However, if none of the characters or story interests you and your inability to care about a cult movie 30 to 40 years younger than you can just put a bunch of working class dudes into a brawl with whatever gang you want. Like totally accurate battle simulator set in the 70s.
Go, babies.
Hey, cockfish! Come on! Let's go!
All right, just a few left, and I think we're gonna flip the script a bit. Instead of games that, the general public has forgotten about, what about things that, like, Rockstar Games has left behind in the dust? For instance, the Smuggler's Run duology. Crazy Taxi with substance smuggling. Every kid's favorite thing stir-fried together. Smuggler's Run, unrelated to the Star Wars ride, is a launch title for the PlayStation 2 that I think holds up today. It's this frantic high-speed racer. You're trying to deliver packages before your opponents with short missions and sizable landscapes, all on that classic 2000s blue disc. This was done by Angel Studios again, and again, it's solid. It's got a campaign where you're essentially flopping across hills and deserts. There's also battle missions where you're ripping alongside a squad of 4 against others. It even teeters into the free-for-all car combat genre that was feeding families for like 3 or 4 glorious years. This thing is fun, although unfortunately the multiplayer is restricted to 2 players on one screen. At least it's still got cop chases. Rockstar sure loves those, huh? Now let's make another one with Chewbacca. Why not?
Ready? Go!
Smuggler's Run didn't light the world on fire with high reviews, but it apparently did sell well enough to warrant a sequel the following year, 2001's Hostile Territory. With such a quick turnover, it's what you'd probably expect. More of the same, but with more levels and stuff to do. More vehicles, more locations, and let's go, FMV cutscenes to tie it all together. And for those of you back then who were seeking to smuggle with your middle school homies, the GameCube port got itself 4-player split screen. However, this would be the last time we'd see any smuggling or running. They really don't make them like this anymore. Just these ridiculous over-the-top combat car racers with campy plots and, well, the whole premise. This type of release was a full game in the 2000s and would probably just be relegated to being a mini game or mode in a bigger release like Grand Theft Auto 6 in modern times. The physics of the cars already feel like they could handle Rocket League levels of flying and speed, and you could easily turn the Crooks and Smugglers game mode into a massive online thing. However, with something like Destruction All-Stars going in one ear and out the other of the entire gaming industry, I'm just not sure that there's a spot for Smuggler's Run now. I guess we'll have to settle for whatever GTA 6 Online has to offer. Now, how's about a release without the police? Yeah, Rockstar actually did make a few of them. Y'all ever heard of Beaterator? Originally launching in 2005 as a free Flash browser-based application, it was a tool Rockstar made for mixing music. Yeah, like an interesting thing they put forth with the intent of letting people do exactly that. Flash forward 4 years, with a little bit of that capitalism, Rockstar leads teamed up with Timbaland to release a fully fledged PSP and iOS version of Beaterator. Maybe not the best time, since music-making apps like Xbox Music Maker or MTV Generator were already old news, and like GarageBand and Fruity Loops were taken over, but still. Only with Beaterator could you make nonsense on the PlayStation Portable. Yeah, not really much to say here. Templates on templates, lots of effects, and the ability to import your own sounds via the memory card, or you could just download them online, if GameSpy didn't take them all to the grave. Beaterator is like a last of its kind, joining the ranks of Korg DS10 Plus as things that are super neat, but not really necessary in the 2020s. Smartphones kind of destroyed that market, though you can still find cool tracks people made using them online. I wonder if anyone's still using it.
Once someone becomes one with this machine, they'll be able to freak it. I think it's going to help a lot of musicians out here.
Yeah, I'm sure Ice-T was making new music on Beaterator while touring with Body Count.
Play a little Xbox.
And now, one last game, and something I'm sure a whole bunch of people have played. How do you take Grand Theft Auto and gear it towards a younger demographic? The answer is boarding school and Rockstar's Bully. The persona of Grand Theft Auto, of the bully of Shin Megami Tensei, take out the guns, bring on the slingshots. Cars? Nope. Bikes. Crazed psychopath main characters? How about Jimmy, a boy that can outrun the local police without an ounce of trouble? All of this packaged smartly in 2006 to be sellable to little Timmy with its T rating, although still denied considering the name of the game was Bully. Or Canis Canem Edit in PAL regions, which is Latin for dog eat dog, an awesome name. The comparisons are made for good reason. It really is like a mini GTA, but Bully does stand out on its own. You've got a more structured day-to-day from being in school. You attend classes that have fun and unique mini-games that'll get you new items and attacks. Oh yeah, you'll be doing some fighting, and you'll be getting in trouble too. You can really see the benefit of a smaller world map with Bully because the town has more density than some of the GTAs from the time. It's overflowing and packed with random things to do. There's entire arcade games, including a future racer that can be played in 3D or overhead. And sure, it's just okay, but it's cool it existed. This attention to detail was what made Rockstar special back then. Bully stars one Jimmy Hopkins, your average rough and tumble teenage rebel, as he attempts to navigate Bulworth Academy for an entire year, against his will of course, and he does that by doing what he does best, fighting people, mostly in self-defense against the other bullies, but in true Rockstar fashion, you can be a little shit too. Along the way, you meet a pretty sizable cast of characters, mostly consisting of tropes, stereotypes, parodies, and Gary, a character so unlikable he joins the ranks of the worst friend characters in all of video games, right alongside Eric Sparrow. Like any good mafia narrative or game, you'll cause havoc, slowly unite the school, and try to take down the biggest bully of all, Nasty Gary. I've got mixed feelings on Bully, as I've never been able to play a version of it that wasn't a terrible port. Each version since the original has this weird input lag, crappy frame rate, or just tends to crash constantly. Thanks PC port. That and the actual combat is just okay. It's similar to the Warriors, albeit dumbed down, which is fine, but its age really shows in 2025. Which brings me to my point, Bully might not be forgotten. I think it's got a bit of a cult classic vibe going on. It did sell 1.5 million copies, but it seems like Rockstar has not given an ounce of care to this franchise. Despite being available on almost every major console in some form or fashion, none are what I would consider definitive. The PC build requires a bunch of tinkering to get it going without crashing, considering it was a PC port in the era where those sucked. The PS4 and 5 version is using their weird PS2 emulator known for slowdown and texture issues, and the Xbox 360 backwards compatible port is just as crash or glitch prone as the others, especially when it pulls the old faithful Yu-Gi-Oh! Season 0 and sends you to the Shadow Realm.
What are you doing, you lazy guts? Get going!
Wait, what? At least the Scholarship Edition has multiplayer, but when the newer Anniversary Edition tends to basically not work, especially on Android, the accessibility ain't there. I think Bully is an interesting game. It's definitely of the times, and something that would probably get a lot of negative press if they announced a sequel. Does Bully beg for a sequel? I'm not sure. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff that you could do if you leaned into it being a bit more lighthearted, considering this is now 20 years old. But more than anything, it seems like Rockstar's decided to leave old Jimmy in the dust. Look, all I'm saying is that we need a new modern way to mow the lawn and play nut shots.
Cause you know what happens to liars?
No, I'm not lying.
We kick them in the balls!
And so there you have it, a bunch of weird and forgotten Rockstar Games. I'm just gonna say Rockstar Games. There's obviously a lot more than what I mentioned here, especially if you look at the individual studios and what they made before Rockstar acquired them, so it's definitely worth looking into at some point. I, for one, thought that Oni was made by Rockstar for the longest time. It's Bungie, I was wrong. But I thought it was Rockstar. If you liked today's video, check out the sponsor, Deliver at All Costs, or head on over to the Patreon, where you can become a backer and support the channel directly. You can also buy a t-shirt over at the Pixel Empire, leave a comment, subscribe, do the things, I'll be here. For now, we're gonna keep it short and sweet, because I don't know how we went over 40 minutes on this one. So, I've been Austin, and catch me next time when we take another look at the dead. Thank you all so much for watching. Special Patreon shout out to Alfred Correa, Benna Oswald, Blackfoot Ferret, Blake Thomas, Charles Rosner, Cheeks, Clerk Fox, Chris Shelton, DX Buster, Dylan Snyder, Fragile Traveler, Hey Quiggles, Idlevice, Jay Roos, Jacoby Fitzpatrick, Kevin Zanowski, Pierre, Platinum Rose, Pacha Bear, Rare Find It, Ryan Talbert, and Vox. Thank you all so much for your generous support. It's been a hot minute since the last video. I think I needed a little break after Suicide Squad, but here we are, and I am back, and I'm excited for what's on the horizon. We might be seeing a little experiments here and there, doing a little more niche kind of things. Funko Fusion is still gonna be coming out sooner rather than later. And yeah, I played a lot of video games in my break. For real, Blueprints is really good. Play video games, they're fun. Or tabletop's cool too. Okay, bye-bye.